Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. A young woman, alone in the quietness of her own world, often found herself longing for something more than the data, a rhythm of life. She had friends, yes, and family nearby, but still there existed within her a hollow space, one that no conversation nor gathering seemed able to fill. She longed for love, that rare kind of connection that could not be mistaken for mere companionship. Each passing day made her heart ache a little more, not from despair, but from the quiet yearning of a soul that wished to be seen, to be cherished. She would often walk through the village paths at dusk, when the fading light turned the sky into soft shades of pink and gold. It was in these moments that her heart spoke the loudest, whispering questions she dared not ask aloud. Where does true love wait? Will it ever find me? Her eyes searched the faces of strangers and the warmth of familiar smiles, yet none seemed to hold the answer she sought. It was during one such evening, on a path where the wildflowers leaned toward the last kiss of daylight, that she first met Geoff. He was not what she had expected. Nor could she have imagined that love, in its purest and most enduring form, would come to her on 4 legs, and with eyes so gentle they seemed to read the secrets of her heart. Geoff was no ordinary dog. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of a soul who understood solitude, and perhaps that was why he recognized her so quickly. The first encounter was simple enough. He approached her with careful steps, as if mindful not to intrude upon her thoughts. She paused, surprised, for he was a stranger to her, yet his presence felt curiously familiar. His gaze was steady but not demanding, warm yet respectful, like the gaze of one who waits to be invited into another's life. She extended her hand, and without hesitation he pressed his head against it. It was in that simple act that the emptiness within her shifted, ever so slightly, as though a small crack had opened to let light in. From that day onward, Geoff became her shadow, her companion, her confidant. Each morning he was there, waiting outside her door, eager not only for the walks they would take, but for the quiet companionship they both so deeply needed. And though she could not put it into words, she felt it. Her heart was no longer alone. At first, she thought it was mere affection, the sort one might share with any loyal pet. But soon she began to understand that Geoff's presence filled her in ways she had not thought possible. When she spoke, he listened, not with words, but with eyes that never wavered, with stillness that was more comforting than any human reply. When her days felt heavy, when the ache of longing pressed upon her chest, he was there, nudging her hand, resting his head upon her lap, reminding her that love does not always arrive dressed in grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a faithful friend who chooses you without question. Her walks grew brighter, the evenings less lonely. Villagers who once looked upon her with polite curiosity now smiled knowingly when they saw her with Geoff. They remarked on how her eyes seemed lighter, her step more assured. Yet she knew it was not admiration she carried, but a quiet joy that only she and Geoff understood. For he had become not only a friend, but the answer to the longing she had carried within her for so long. Love, she realized, had never been absent. It had simply taken a form she had not expected, and perhaps that was the lesson Geoff was sent to teach her, that the heart does not always choose in the way we imagine, nor does it always follow the path we think it must. Love can be found in loyalty, in patience, in the silent understanding between two souls who simply belong together. And so, in discovering Geoff, she discovered herself. The emptiness that had once weighed upon her no longer defined her days. For she had found in him not only the companionship of a dog, but the devotion of a love so pure, it needed no words at all. It was in that moment she understood. Sometimes The heart finds its truest friend before it finds anything else. There are times in life when words, however beautiful, seem insufficient to capture the depth of feeling that exists between two souls. We speak often, believing that love must be declared, that it must be explained in promises and declarations. Yet there are loves that cannot be reduced to words at all. They live instead in silence, in the tender exchange of glances, and in the small acts that pass so quietly they might be mistaken for ordinary kindness, until one feels the weight of their meaning. With Geoff, such was the way of things. He never spoke, of course, nor could he, yet his silence was never empty. It carried a language of its own, one that could be understood only by a heart willing to listen. She soon discovered that his loyalty, his attentiveness, was not merely habit, but devotion in its purest form. There were mornings when she awoke with the heaviness of dreams she could not bear to remember. The world outside her window felt gray, her heart unwilling to rise with the sun, and yet there he was, waiting patiently, his eyes fixed upon her with a calm that urged her forward. No words could have pulled her from the shadows of those mornings as swiftly as his quiet presence did. With a gentle wag of his tail and a head resting against her arm, he seemed to whisper, "You are not alone, I am here." It was not speech, yet it was the most powerful assurance she had ever known. On days when her burdens felt too great to share with anyone else, she would sit upon the old wooden bench beneath the oak tree. She would not speak nor cry, but Geoff would always come to her side. He would lean gently against her, offering nothing more than the warmth of his body and the steadiness of his breath. That simple closeness, that unspoken comfort, was love itself. Not a love dressed in promises or adorned with declarations, but one made true by the choice to stay, to remain, to be present without demand. There were small gestures too, so subtle they might have passed unnoticed by anyone else. He would bring her a leaf, a stick, some small treasure from the path, placing it at her feet as though to say, "This is for you." It was not the gift itself that mattered, but the intention behind it. For love often shows itself not in grand offerings, but in those quiet reminders that one is thought of, remembered, chosen. At times she wondered if she had misunderstood, if she had merely placed her longing upon him, imagining affection where there was only instinct. But each time doubt whispered, Geoff's actions silenced it. He followed her not because he had to, but because he wished to. He watched over her not because it was expected, but because it was his nature to care for her. In every small act of loyalty, every glance of understanding, he taught her that love does not always announce itself. It is lived, breathed, and proven. And perhaps this was the truest form of love, not the one that dazzles with words, but the one that endures in the smallest, simplest acts. Love that wakes with you in the morning and rests beside you at night. Love that needs no audience, no explanation, and no proof beyond its own quiet constancy. She began to notice how, in his company, her need for words lessened. She no longer sought explanations or assurances, for she felt them in his every step beside her. The loneliness that had once driven her to seek love in distant promises was replaced by the certainty that she already possessed it, in a form more steadfast than she had ever imagined. And so she came to understand that love is not always spoken. It does not always arrive with eloquence or poetry. Sometimes it comes as a dog waiting patiently at the door, as eyes that follow you across the room, as the gentle weight of a head upon your lap when you are weary. It comes in loyalty, in small gifts, in the quiet comfort of being seen without a single word spoken. In Geoff she found the truth she had long been searching for, that real love, the kind that heals and sustains, does not always need words at all. There comes a time when affection ripens into something far deeper, something no longer fragile or uncertain, but strong and enduring. What began as companionship between her and Geoff soon grew into a bond so unshakable that it seemed woven into the very fabric of her being. It was not sudden, nor did it arrive with fanfare. Instead, it built itself quietly, day by day, in the simplest exchanges, until she could no longer remember a life without him at her side. When she walked through the fields, Geoff walked with her. When she sat in silence, lost in thought, he was there, his steady presence grounding her in ways no words could achieve. In his company, she felt protected, not by force, but by the certainty that he would never leave her. It was a bond not born of necessity, but of choice, the purest kind of love, given freely without expectation. There were moments when she tested it, though not intentionally. Life has its way of challenging even the strongest ties. Storms came both within and around her. There were days she felt lost in her own sorrow, her spirit heavy, her heart unsure of its place. Yet Geoff never faltered. He remained, his gaze unwavering, his loyalty unbroken. When the world seemed too sharp, too unkind, it was his closeness that softened it, reminding her that not all love fails, not all bonds are meant to break. It was then she realized the depth of what they shared. This was not affection in passing, nor a companionship easily replaced. It was a union of two hearts, different in form but alike in need. He gave her the steadiness she had always longed for, and in return she gave him the warmth of a home, the gentleness of her care, the devotion of her heart. Together they created something that no one could separate, something that belonged entirely to them. At times she marveled at the simplicity of it all. Could true love really be found here in the devotion of a dog? It was a question that startled her at first, for love had always been presented to her as something grand, romantic, adorned with declarations and vows. Yet the more she lived within this bond, the clearer it became. True love is not measured by the shape it takes, but by the constancy it shows. It does not matter whether it comes dressed in words or cloaked in silence, whether it walks on 2 feet or 4. What matters is that it remains unwavering, even when all else falters. She thought often of the people who searched endlessly for love, believing it to be hidden in distant places or bound to conditions that must be met. And yet, here it was, sitting quietly beside her, looking at her with eyes that needed nothing more than her presence. The simplicity of it humbled her, for in Geoff she found not just companionship, but the truest form of love, unconditional, unchanging, unbreakable. There were nights when the weight of loneliness once threatened her peace, and yet now, even in silence, she felt full. She would look at him resting by the hearth, his breathing steady, his body curled in perfect ease, and she knew without question that she was no longer alone. The bond between them was not fragile nor fleeting. It was as certain as the rising sun, as sure as the turning of the seasons, and in this realization she felt her heart awaken in a new way. She no longer longed for love as something distant, something yet to come. She understood now that love had already arrived, had been with her each day, growing stronger with every step, every glance, every moment shared. It was not the love she had once imagined, but it was purer, deeper, and far more enduring than she could have hoped. And so she came to see that the truest bonds are not bound by words or promises. They are written in loyalty, in presence, in the simple act of staying. And when she looked at Geoff, she knew with certainty that theirs was a bond no time or trial could ever break. It is often said that love is most easily spoken of in fair weather, when the days are bright and the path is smooth. But the truest measure of love is not found in those simple hours of ease. It is discovered in the storms, when trials weigh upon the heart and shadows lengthen across the road. It is then that one learns who will remain, who will endure, and who will stay even when all else begins to falter. For her, the trials did not come suddenly, but crept into her life as time often allows them to do. There were seasons of loss when hopes she had carried so carefully seemed to slip from her hands, leaving her disheartened and weary. There were days when her spirit felt fragile, as though one more disappointment might break her completely. And there were nights when loneliness pressed so heavily upon her chest that even sleep could not relieve her of it. Yet in all of these moments, Geoff was there, not merely as a companion to pass the time, but as a constant presence, steadfast and unshaken by the storms that threatened her peace. When she sat in silence, struggling to summon the courage to rise again, Geoff lay beside her, refusing to let her despair swallow her whole. He did not ask her to explain, nor did he turn away when her sorrow grew too heavy. He simply remained, and in that simple act he gave her the strength to endure. There were times when she feared she had nothing left to give. Her heart felt emptied of joy, her spirit too worn to offer warmth to another. But Geoff never asked her to be more than what she was in that moment. He accepted her weariness, her brokenness, her silence. In his eyes there was no judgment, no demand, only the quiet assurance that her worth had not diminished, that she was loved even in her lowest hour. It was in these trials that she came to understand the depth of their bond, for love that thrives only in sunshine is not love at all. Real love, she learned, is the love that waits with you in the rain, that holds fast when the winds grow fierce, that does not vanish when the path becomes difficult. And Geoff, in his unwavering devotion, proved this to her time and time again. When illness touched her, leaving her weak and confined, Geoff was there, his steady eyes never leaving her side. When days of uncertainty weighed upon her, he walked beside her, step for step, as though to share the burden she carried. Even when the world outside felt cold and indifferent, he reminded her that she was not forgotten, not forsaken. His presence became her anchor, the one truth she could hold to when everything else seemed uncertain. She began to see that their story was not one of fleeting affection, but of enduring love, tested and strengthened by hardship. Each challenge, rather than weakening their bond, only wove it more tightly. For in every trial, Geoff's loyalty proved unshakable, his love unyielding. She could not imagine a day when he would not be there, nor a moment when his constancy would fail. And in this certainty she found comfort, hope, and the quiet courage to move forward. Love, she realized, is not defined by ease. It is proven by endurance, and the truest love is the one that remains when all else is stripped away, the love that holds fast through loss, through sorrow, through time itself. Geoff had shown her this in the most faithful of ways, not through words, but through action, through presence, through the choice to remain when he could have turned away. And so, as the years passed and trials came and went, their bond did not weaken. Instead, it grew stronger, rooted not in fleeting joy, but in the certainty that they had weathered life together. She no longer doubted the love she had found, for it had been tested, refined, and proven true. And in the end, she understood that the greatest love stories are not those unmarked by hardship, but those that endure through it, emerging even stronger than before. There are wounds that time alone cannot mend, pains that linger quietly in the heart long after the world believes they should be forgotten. She carried such wounds, invisible to others, yet heavy enough to shape her days. A broken heart does not announce itself, but it lingers in the quiet moments, when laughter feels hollow, when silence feels unbearable, when hope feels like a story meant for others but not for oneself. She had once dreamed of a love that would lift her, that would fill her days with certainty and joy. Yet disappointment had taught her that not all dreams find their place in reality. The ache of that truth had settled within her, leaving her tender, cautious, and unwilling to believe that healing was possible. And yet, Geoff entered her life not with the promises of healing, nor with the grand gestures of romance, but with something far more powerful: presence. He asked nothing of her, demanded no explanation for the sadness she carried. He simply remained, offering himself with a quiet constancy that asked only for trust. At first, she scarcely noticed the change he brought. Her heart still carried its weight, her days still held their grayness, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the heaviness began to lift. It was in the way Geoff followed her without question, as though her company was the greatest gift he could ever receive. It was in the way he leaned against her when she sat in sorrow, reminding her that even in her silence she was not forgotten. It was in the way his joy never dimmed, as though each moment with her was reason enough to be content. These were not cures in the grand sense, yet they were remedies all the same. With each small act of devotion, he began to stitch the pieces of her heart together again. She found herself laughing, first in surprise, then in delight at his playful ways. A stick dropped at her feet, a sudden chase through the fields, a splash into the stream, such simple joys that reminded her of the life she had nearly forgotten how to feel. Each smile softened her heart, each laugh eased the ache, until she began to see that perhaps healing does not come in a single moment, but in countless little ones woven together by love. There were still days when sorrow returned, when memory weighed heavily upon her. But even then, Geoff remained steadfast as ever. He did not turn away from her pain, nor grow weary of her melancholy. Instead, he became her strength in those moments, his silent devotion assuring her that she was safe, that she was loved, even in her brokenness. It was in those very hours that she understood the depth of his gift. Love not as a cure, but as a balm, patient and steady, allowing her to heal in her own time. Her heart, once hesitant to believe again, began to trust the quiet lessons Geoff offered. That love is not always dramatic, nor does it always arrive with grandeur. Sometimes it comes softly, through loyalty and kindness, through laughter shared on an ordinary afternoon, through the unwavering presence of one who will not leave. Love, she realized, does not erase the past, but it makes the present bearable and the future possible. As she looked back upon the days that once felt endless in their sorrow, she saw how far she had come. The woman who once walked alone with downcast eyes now walked with Geoff by her side, her steps lighter, her spirit renewed. Her broken heart had not only mended, it had grown stronger, filled with a new kind of hope she had never imagined. It was Geoff who taught her that healing is not a miracle that comes all at once, but a journey walked patiently, side by side, until the ache becomes memory and the memory becomes peace. And in that journey, she discovered that love, in its truest form, has the power to restore what despair once tried to steal. And so, with every breath of loyalty he gave, her heart found its way back to hope. As the years passed, she came to see that the story she lived with Geoff was not the sort she had once imagined for herself. In her younger days, she had pictured love in the form of sweeping gestures, grand confessions, and fairy tale endings painted in gold. She thought love must arrive dramatically, with declarations that left the world in awe. Yet as she looked back on her journey, she realized her love story had been written in a quieter hand, one that etched its words not upon stages but in the simple fabric of daily life. With Geoff, love was never a spectacle, but it was always certain. It was found in every sunrise walk they took together, in the laughter that grew from his playful ways, in the steady loyalty that never once wavered through hardship or change. Their story was not about fleeting passion that burned quickly, but about the enduring flame that never dimmed, even as time moved gently forward. It was, in truth, the kind of love that most hearts yearn for, the love that stays. She understood, as she reflected, that forever does not always appear in the ways we are taught to expect. Fairy tales speak of perfect endings, of untroubled happiness, as though love itself could be untouched by sorrow. But real love is not untouched. It is tested, stretched, refined, and made deeper by the challenges it survives. And so her story, though it did not glitter with fantasy, shone with something far greater, truth. Geoff had given her that truth every day. In his companionship, she learned that forever is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, humble. Sometimes it is a presence that does not leave, even when the years change all else. And as she grew older, she came to cherish this more than anything she might once have dreamed. The promise she shared with him was not written in words, nor sealed in ceremony, but in every moment they had walked together, in every silent vow kept without being spoken. There were times when others did not understand. They could not see how a bond such as theirs could hold the same depth as those written about in stories of lovers and heroes, but she did not need their understanding, for she knew that her love story was no less eternal, no less true. It was not measured by appearances or judged by convention. It was measured by the strength of their bond, by the way her heart had been transformed through his presence, by the way her life had been lifted from loneliness into quiet joy. And so she embraced the truth that her love story did not look like a fairy tale. It did not need to, for what she had found was something stronger than fleeting magic. It was enduring devotion, the kind that outlasts time itself. She understood now that love, when given with purity and constancy, does not fade when the years grow long, nor does it vanish when trials come. It remains steadfast as a promise carried beyond the moment, beyond the years, into forever. As she looked at Geoff resting peacefully at her feet, she felt the fullness of that forever. Not the forever that promises perfection, but the forever that promises presence. A promise that love, once found in its truest form, can never truly be lost. And so she understood at last. Love stories may not always look like fairy tales, but the truest ones are those that last forever. Thank you for joining me on this heartfelt journey with Geoff and the power of love in its purest form. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It means so much. Don't forget to subscribe for more timeless stories that inspire hope and connection. Share this with someone who believes in love that lasts beyond words. Until next time, may love in all its forms stay with you forever.